I was just waiting for that to get started. Thank you, Gabby. Welcome. You all have a good third day of workshops? Woo! I try this sometimes, and it hardly ever works, but maybe you can defy my experience and come through. I'm thinking maybe we can try the little wave. Can we start over here and just do the across the, there we go. That could be, Hannah, would you say that that's the best one yet? Definitely the best. Definitely best one yet. Let's have a round of applause for the wave. People coming through. Week 3 comes through. Welcome to our third faculty event of the week. My name is David Simpson. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the program director here at the Fine Arts Work Center. I am very excited to welcome you to a wonderful faculty event. It's Poet Night here at the Fine Arts Work Center. We have 2 very fine poets, Kimiko Hahn and Dante Micheaux, are going to be with us tonight. And before I get off the stage, just want to say a few things before I turn it over to our incredible poets. First of all, and most importantly, we now have iced coffee. So, big round of applause. Yeah, we could do another wave. No, let's not push it. Let's not push it. In the fridge, you can, and across the way in the lounge, you can find containers of iced coffee, and then below there's ice with a scoop. We don't have glasses big enough for it, so you have to use a stupid little cup, so you have to refill it a lot of times. But, we're starting to, I should have ordered those. Anyway, so it's baby steps. Anyway, so iced coffee for your cooling and hydrating pleasure, although coffee doesn't really work for hydrating. That's just a good point. Okay, I'll stop. Okay, business, housekeeping. Dante and Kimiko's books will be for sale at the back of the room after the event. Please be sure to check them out, and they'll be sitting back there signing books after the event. There are bathrooms still down the hall on the left-hand side. You can also fill your water on the right-hand side. The gallery and the bookstore are on your right-hand side. Please check out the exhibition if you've probably already done so, but in the small chance that you haven't, please do. It's really wonderful. And I also noticed, and am very pleased by, the progress of people signing up for Student Night. So yeah, we're on to the second page of sign-ups, so big hand for you guys. If you haven't yet signed up, I hope you will. And you know all the reasons because I've been complaining about it the last 2 days, so I'll stop. But I hope you do. You won't regret it, I promise. Big shout out, as always, to East End Books for helping manage our bookstore at the back and in the gallery. If you haven't been there, there's obviously many more books in the bookstore, but they're just down at the bottom of Pearl Street, hang a left on Commercial, and they're like 20 feet on the right-hand side. So check them out if you haven't already. It's a great little bookstore. Also, shout out to Arts Foundation of Cape Cod and the Cape Cod 5 Foundation for their generous support of our summer public programming. And cushions available, as always. Also, assisted listening devices, if that would make your experience better. Please ask Hannah or Fatima. They'll help you get set up with that. And that's it, except for the cell phone part. So if you haven't done that already, please turn them to silent so that we can pay uninterrupted attention to our lovely poets who are about to take the stage. So without further ado, I would like to invite one of Dante's students up to the stage to introduce Dante. So please, Edward Mabry, please come to the stage.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you. Ophah's legacy. Empire dwindled to tetrarchy, reliant as an exotic concubine on foreign commonwealth. The roads rampant with painted men to the whole kingdom the brunt of Londonwick's folly. The sovereign silent and ceremonious, though powers rise at the choosing of the garter, dazzles the opening of parliament in borrowed jewels. I fed the son of Opha Rex, a staggeringly gifted child, the food of slaves, and his belly had never been so full. Dante Micheaux. The judge's citation on the Four Quartets Prize for his book Circus is this, quote, "How right that this poet's first name should be Dante, for his Circus is a comedy, a savage comedy, lacerating dialects, fingering wounds, looking for love's right and wrong in the crevices of history and of humiliated bodies, bodes. And yet his language exalts, triumphs, and freely rummages in the treasuries of the Bible, Baudelaire, Whitman, Eliot, Baraka, and Mahalia Jackson, taking what it needs, making it his sovereign own, a wrested blessing. Congratulations, Dante Micheaux, on your astonishing Circus." Dante Micheaux is the author of Circus, Indolent Books 2018, which won the Four Quartets Prize from the Poetry Society of America and the T.S. Eliot Foundation and Amorous Shepherd. Meadow Press 2010. He holds a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from New York University. Micheaux's honors include a prize in poetry from the Vera List Center for Art and Politics, the Oscar Wilde Award, and fellowships from Canem Foundation and the New York Times Foundation. His poems and translations have appeared in African American Review, the American Poetry Review, Callaloo, Literary Imagination, Poem a Day, Poetry, Poetry London, Pen Review, and Tongue, among other journals and anthologies. Micheaux's other honors include the Ambit Magazine Poetry Prize and fellowships from the New York Times Foundation and Canem, where he is Director of Programs. In January of 2024, he served as the guest editor of Poem of a Day. I am taking his class in order to learn, to be fed, and to be freed. His grace is only bested by his writing, and his writing is only bested by his grace. His literal belief in me has made me a better human and a better black man. We are all give thanks for accidents. Dante Micheaux, being a poet, being one of those things. He went to college and was in what used to be called a computer lab, for all you young people who don't understand what that is. But there was a room with computers. You could not take one home because they weighed 5,000 pounds. And you printed up all your work in those labs. And if you were a smart student, then you printed up just your work. If you were a cunning student, then you printed up your work and anything else you needed to print up at the time at the school's overpaid tuition expense. Dante, upon doing so, submitted an essay to one of his professors and accidentally had added a poem to it. The professor, rather than chastise him, report him, or even, God forbid, flunk him, left him a note for his essay, asking why was he studying anything else aside from poetry. Being slightly hard-headed as artists would be to do, he ignored that note for a little while. But we all give thanks to God and our creators that eventually the message sunk through. FAWC, Dante Micheaux.
Thank you very much for that most generous introduction. I don't think I've ever been introduced so well and so thoroughly. I am going to also time myself. We should be right at the exact amount of time, these comments included. I always begin my readings with a poem by another writer. And because I want to practice what I preach to my students, I'm actually going to read 8 poems today, 3 of which are by other writers. I wanted to demonstrate to my students that there are some poems that I love, and I wanted to show the poems that are their antecedents. This first poem is called Parable by Carl Phillips. It was published in the year 2000. There was a saint once. He had but to ring across water a small bell. All manner of fish rose as answer. He was that holy, persuasive, both. Or the fish perhaps merely hungry, their bodies a shimmer with that hope, especially that hunger brings, whatever the reason, the fish coming unassigned, in schools coming into the saint's hand, and instead of getting food, becoming food. I have thought since of your body, as I first came to know it, how it still can be with mine sometimes. I think on that immediate last gesture of the fish leaving water for flesh, for guarantee they will die, and I cannot rest on what to call it, not generosity or a blindness, trust, brute stupidity, not the soul distracted from its natural prayer, which is attention, for in the story they are paying attention. They lose themselves, eyes open. Carl Phillips. This poem is called A Crossable Ocean. Take only from tools you carry at the hip deepest imagination to shore, and find some quiet, though not altogether secluded scrap of beach, to bask in light's lethargic invitation, no, but to look long across the waters and, by chance, glimpse a you of whom you had no idea, peering back, imploring some bridge or craft of your design that brings you nearer to what fear denies. The next poem is called For You, Sweetheart, I'll Sell Plutonium Reactors, Yusef Komanyaka, 1979. For you, sweetheart, I ride back down into black smoke early Sunday morning, cutting fog, grab the money sack of gold teeth, diamond mines, soil creep-grown ancient cities, archaeological diggings, and yellow bulldozers turn around all night in bloodlit villages. Inhabitants here once gathered seashells that glimmered like pearls. When the smoke clears, you'll see an erected throne like a mountain to scale. Institutions built with bones, guns hidden in walls that swing open like big-mouthed B-52s. Your face in the mirror is my face. You tap dance on tabletops for me, while corporate bosses arm wrestle in back rooms for your essential downfall. I entice homosexuals into my basement butcher shop. I put my hands around another sharecropper's throat for that mink coat you want from Saks Fifth, shortchange another beggar woman, steal another hit song from Sleepy John Estes, salt another gold mine in Cripple Creek, drive another motorcycle up a circular ice wall, face another public gunslinger like a bad chest wound, just to slide hands under black silk. Like the ancient mariner steering a skeleton ship against the moon, I'm their hired gunman, if the price is right. Take a contract on myself. They'll name mountains and rivers in my honor. I'm a drawbridge over manholes for you, sweetheart. I'm paid $200,000 to pick up a red telephone anytime and call up God. I'm making tobacco pouches out of the breast of Indian maidens so we can stand in a valley and watch grass grow. My response. Siding with the Israelis. Because you kissed me with your eyes, I'm willing to don the desert camouflage, sling a rifle over my left shoulder and aim east toward Ramallah. Your age is my age on the draft notice. I'll burn bushes and immigrate to the Holy Land, desecrated with combat boots. Give me footing on the dome of the rock and I'll piss on the pilgrims that have come to pray, show you what a Zionist can be. Make me a night soldier and my black-skinned body will pass through the land of the Palestinians like the breath of God. Devour their firstborn, leave the blood-stained lentils and post of your people untouched. I'll deliver all the lands for the chosen in a single night. Oil contracts will leave a sticky residue on the desks of cabinet members from the untied states, while caterers at the presidential father and son picnic serve fresh figs imported on the South Lawn. The thorn of Sharon will make me a general, and absolution from duty will come to you in the morning. I take a country by force that was promised by faith, naming the resistance terrorism and my army innocence. I buck boys in back rooms of abomination to harvest the fruit you like. I tell another lie about wanting to be Jewish when I was 10, deny that I walked Muslim children to school after my city was bombed, warn the Somali ambassador that her son is no longer safe with me. I will become a conqueror of refugees exiled in their own home, an exploder of babies in bassinets, a barbed wire fence dissecting families so we can lie in the dust and watch snails race up Golgotha. This next poem is called San Sepolcro by Jury Graham, 1993. In this blue light, I can take you there, snow having made me a world of bones seen through to. This is my house, my section of Etruscan wall, my neighbor's lemon trees, and just below the lower church, the airplane factory. A rooster crows all day from mist outside the walls. There's milk on the air, ice on the oily lemon skins. How clean the mind is, holy grave. It is this girl by Piero della Francesca unbuttoning her blue dress, her mantle of weather, to go into labor. Come, we can go in. It is before the birth of God. No one has risen yet to the museums, to the assembly line, bodies and wings, to the open air market. This is what the living do, go in. It's a long way, and the dress keeps opening from eternity to privacy. Quickening, inside the heart, is tragedy. The present moment forever stillborn, but going in, each breath is a button, coming undone, something terribly nimble-fingered, finding all the stops. My response. Typically, I don't say anything about the poems, but this one needs a little gloss. Some of you may know the subject of this poem by a pseudonym that he went by in the early noughties. His pseudonym was Mr. Hands. It's called Pinion. The plod of the trespassers on wet turf in the sinking dark marked their path, plan, toward the barn where it slept, the stallion resting from its thoroughbred charge, hungry for oats, hay-nested, silent save the hot breath of its nostrils. With night as protector, the men did steal into the animal's stall, craving its smell and cozy parameter, the better to bind their shame and lustful intention toward beast, equine, its shape, mythic tether to man, the centaur's nobility and speed, stride. Perhaps it was unbridled envy of nature unbridled, or the desire to be subdued raw and primitively too, that led one, having been broken early and practiced, to seek consolation in this mating of sorts, the dumb and biological thrust of the teased phallus, the spewing and satisfaction all animal, really, the win-win grace of it, the horse, both horse and rider. So now I'm going to read a little around Circus. I'm going to read a good deal of the poem, but not all of it. All months are cruel, ladies and gentlemen. The lilacs that last in the dooryard bloomed are dead, so come you here for pleasure, and we shall entertain. See us Negroes dance and sing for you, dear audience, we will do most anything. Our jungle bunnies dance the cooch for nickel, dime, anytime. Big George can lift a heifer on his shoulders, sip a brew, and shine your shoe, but barely breaks a sweat. Oh, and Trickster in the stands will borrow money, steal your wallets, and pay you back in advance. Dangling Daniel hangs from a noose, bug-eyed, but do not fear. For just $1 more you can make him holler with the crack of a whip in your hand. Step right up, encourage the kids. Out back there's a ninny parade. Come one, come all, tell your friends. This is the show that never ends. Chipped brownstone stoops cradle the detritus of life. She is one, lost in satiety, the bliss of oblivion, harlot of the dope in her veins. Behind her looms a hell rich with the darkness of forgetting, even in daylight, in view of children taught to steer clear but never do. Curious about the freedom of barely clothed women who do not work, and men with big cars whose pockets are lined with money, unlike their fathers, who do exist, who conduct trains in the underworld, who they never see, who only see them when they are sleeping, who know what they know about the world but cannot protect them, who cannot rid their lives of women like her, seen on the street every day, on the way to school, on the way home, a face more familiar than their mother's, with a name they remember and include in rhyme. She has asked them for $1 before, in the bodega next door to the house on which stoop she sits, its particle board windows keeping her shame from the sight of passers-by. Inside, she is the plaything of Satan's doppelgangers, the ball in a game of jacks, a hole-in-one, her breast like dice, her body a crumpled lottery ticket arching toward a nice shot. Stumbling to the rhythm of no music, she laughs, drools, knowing that at the end of this dance she will be offered the favor she desires most, the luster on her tongue, the calm of fantastic stupor, in a corner, on a corner, cornered. In such a state she dreams of ridiculous wealth by a pool, in a fur coat, but wakes on a pile of dead rats, phlegmatic, too gone to go. She's hungry and can hear an ice cream truck outside, makes for the door, makes for the curb where the ice cream truck is, does not have $1. Woe unto you, illusion seekers! The milk from the breast of the benevolent stepmother is tainted with illusions. Refuse. Hold your breath, brethren. Remember, en route to the land of milk and honey is the desert, and the milk is an illusion, and the honey is funny honey, acid honey, trip you out honey. The desert is where you want to be. Stay away from the water. Remember where the water brought you. Be rabid in the endless water. Swallow and die. The illusions make you dance, slip, slide, shake, boogaloo, shangalang, ain't no thing but a chain gang. Elude the illusions. The illusions want more and then some. The illusions want work with no sass and entertainment. Why you think you're dancing? You on a party ride. It's shock therapy, which causes dehydration, which causes want of water. Why you think you dancing? Stay away from the water, to a worthless thing. The illusions are worthless, and you who follow illusion become worthless. How empty your worship in a God-made world with your handmade apocalypse and its denigrated singing. You have been given poisoned water to drink, and the thirst is an illusion, makes you dance. The spectators are impatient for popcorn, for its salt, for your weight in salt, as they watch the show that never ends and become thirsty and drink the water and become corrupted by their own illusions. Heed, dancers and singers in the machine. Stop and listen to the noise subside, and don't be surprised that you made the noise or that the spectators are quiet, gone mute long ago. You crush the hearts and shake the bones of your prophets and do not hear. Become a menace to your enemies. Cease praying to the gone. You have the proof. You are the proof. Why you think you dancing? Can't you feel it? 1-2 step. The exhaustion. 1-2 step. They love it when you 1-2 step. Why do you think you're dancing? The weaker, the more you feel it, the slipshod guilt of a gyrating stripper, blind to redemption, a clutch of dollar bills in hand. There is remedy, a dose to pry you free from sanity, the marvelous trick of illusion. Stop dancing, stop singing, hoard the giving it up treasure. You have forsaken your house and abandoned your heritage and given up your heart to its enemies. Your eyes are false, diluted, your colors fade. You have become fat mimicries, slaves to the audience, a party all the time madness, bloated beyond belief. Flee the big top, come into the sun and be still. Baptize in the light, be still, sweat, let it seep out you or have it beat out you. Kill the hunky's monkey, or eternity awaits you in the disco inferno. You are weary from holding it in. Take off your clothes, run naked, let it all hang loose if you're feeling afflicted. These lords love a sinner. Shake what your master gave you. Shake it loose, wrest yourself from it. It's not yours, it never was, just part of the contract. Part of the deed became your creed. You have the proof. You are the proof. Cease praying to the gone. Become a menace to your enemies. Stop the show, for none will bemoan you. Your yoke tossed off and sinking in time. No buoy for those giddy and drowning in the water. Stay away from the water. Remember where the water brought you. Swallow and die. The hour has already scattered here in the unreal city. Heed, dancers and singers in the machine. You are its industry. Crumble, flee the big top. Cartwheels and hallelujahs festoon the heat. Underneath a white tarpaulin, holiness in all its unholy rejoicing. What once sheltered a boy's laughter comes down on the heads of a people, comes down on our heads, and few notice. The poles, the ropes sink into the ground, pressed against the tarp. There is no sound, but the spirit makes the bodies writhe. The old mothers offer their dwindling soprano, a precious utterance that summons the Savior, the only sound that summons these days. Last days, the old mothers know the end of days. They sweat a passion in their white dresses and kerchiefs, pray for strength and necessary talk. Who says from the pulpit, I love the name, but stretches out a hand to signal hats, chargers, and velvet bags with wooden handles? What once sheltered a boy's curiosity comes down in the grin of an ungodly charlatan, and few notice. Down by the river under which I was put, by my own accord, I asked in prayer, in my silent time. In fear I asked. The book read, after the water there is only life. So, when I was bad, when it was a secret, when I knew it was no mistake, when I saw the blood moon and crawled under the bed, away from the avenging angels, away from the blast of the horn, before the earth shook and closed my eyes, I asked for the water, asked to be taken, to be put under, so far under death, under sin, under the world of nights, asked for the water and not the shadow dance of the men behind the shades. After the water was light. After the light, there was clarity in waves. After clarity, death remained, and decision. I want to thank David for inviting me to be here. As I said when I arrived, I'd imagined this place for 20 years, and it certainly lived up to that image in my head. Thank you to my colleagues. It's been wonderful spending time with you, and most especially thank you to my students. I will close with one poem, Under the Rubble. A stone against a tank, stones against an army of tanks. A father throws a stone at a gun so that the gun turns away from his child. A stone against a missile, a stone against a carpet of bombs. They were people of the olive and of the sea, and now they are people of the stone. A stone against a bullet, a stone against death. The child escapes into another father's arms, or mother's, or others. A stone against death. The fellaheen throw their baskets of olives at a gun, an olive against a bullet. A grandmother chases a gun away from the mosque with her cane, wood against a bullet, wisdom against a bullet, escaped into the arms of a neighbor, into the home of neighbors, sanctuary against a bullet, sanctuary against a tank, sanctuary against a bomb. The adolescents strip down to their undergarments and walk with their hands above their heads, innocence against a bullet, the ideolation of modesty and hunger against a bullet, against a sniper's bullet, sanctuary against a bomb, a missile against the home of a neighbor. The child becomes whispers in the dust, stones against an army of tanks against healers, hundreds of bodies in a shallow grave, their hands tied behind their backs, suffocated in prayer, an army of tanks against convalescence, a stone against a wall advancing toward the sea. They were people of the olive and of the sea, and now are people of the stone, a stone against the sea, a stone against a wall advancing toward the sea. Half a man sips coffee embellished with cardamom from the hands of a neighbor, his legs and sex spoiled by concrete and rebar. A missile against a building against a man. The neighbor asks if he can hear whispers in the dust, dust against dust, dust against stone, stone against bullet, bullet against infant, infant against hunger, hunger against tank, an army of tanks against healers, hundreds of bodies, limbs, prayers, olives, wisdom with no schools to house it, or people. They were people of the olive and of the sea, and now they are people of the stone. Can you hear their whispers in the dust? Thank you.
Ooh, we need to give Dante some more applause, please. Also, big thanks to Edward for that wonderful and moving introduction. Now, to move on, I would like to invite one of Kimiko's students to the stage to introduce her. Can I please welcome Molly Aiken to the stage, please?
Hello. Yep, there we go. That's probably better for my height. I'm so happy to introduce Kimiko Hahn this afternoon. My time in Kimiko's workshop has been challenging, enriching, and such a delight. As grateful as I am for the virtual spaces we've inhabited these past years, there's nothing like gathering and sharing creative energy in person. I started writing in earnest in the early pandemic and found my mentors virtually. Unbeknownst to her, Kimiko was one of those mentors. I read her books, gobbled up podcast episodes. I heard her generosity, curiosity, and wit in those interviews and thought, someday I'll meet her. It took a while, but here we are. So Kimiko Hahn is the author of 10 books of poems who cast a wide net for subject matter. In her latest collection, Foreign Bodies, she revisits the personal as political while exploring the immigrant body, the endangered animal's body, objects removed from children's bodies, hoarded things, and charms. The Ghost Forest, new and selected poems, is forthcoming. In 2023, Hahn was the recipient of the Ruth Lilly Prize for Lifetime Achievement from the Poetry Foundation and was elected as a Chancellor of the American Academy of Poets. Her other honors include a Guggenheim Fellowship, Penn Volkler Award, Shelley Memorial Prize, a Lila Wallace Reader's Digest Writers Award, as well as fellowships from the National Endowments for the Arts, the New York Foundation for the Arts. She teaches in the MFA Program for Creative Writing and Literary Translation at Queens College, City University of New York, and is currently co-editing an anthology of zuihitsu, which we've been learning about in workshop. With that, Kimiko.
I love soapboxes. Give me a soapbox anytime. Thank you so much, Molly. Let me be a good reader and start my stopwatch. Thanks a million to Sharon, the executive director, David, Sarah, Hannah, Fatima, and also Chandra. You all make the workshops and the programs stay so glorious and gloriously smooth. You allow us all space to take risks in our art, and I include myself since I'm doing the work alongside my students, and to move beyond comfort while being comfortable. And thank you, participants, faculty, and students in my class. Thank you for trusting me when I've asked you to tear work up and then take tape or glue sticks and do something else. I am so delighted that in our workshop we have people from different genres and different outlooks. Thank you, fellow writers, and what a pleasure to read with Dante. Thank you. Excuse me. Inspired by land acknowledgements, I'm going to open with this poem written after I was invited to write about land near my home in the borough of Queens, New York. And it opens with a quote. It's an ode, so I am speaking to mud. Ode to the mud in Corona Park. Quote, walk so silently that the bottoms of your feet become ears. Pauline Oliveros. After all, you persist this late winter to offer history and souvenir, so I walk, as a teacher instructed, listening to you with my feet. I hear the slow creak of a glacier, ice sheets breaking stone into terminal moraine. I hear the waters in a glacial lake and rivulets, torrents turning earth to marsh, then the Lenape hunted, then the Dutch use tufts and twigs for grazing animals. I hear their lowing, I hear muskets, I hear the metal on road and rail, and after the rich enjoyed a quiet green resort, there came dumping. Can you hear the tons of ash? Can you hear the stench and infestation? Can you hear the fur trappers and squatters? I hear them, and the locals collecting firewood. I hear the lawns unrolled for the fair, the vigils and games, the crimes. We cannot forget the crimes. Hear the picnic benches and picnickers. Hear the macadam, the gravel. Hear new stampedes, new trains of thought, new embraces, new ardor. The centuries whisper to my feet. So the book cover from Foreign Bodies has little tiny objects, and they are from the collection of laryngologist Dr. Shivai Quixote Jackson, who was born in 1865. He collected over the course of his career 2,000 objects that he pulled from children's upper respiratory system, and he saved all of them. He was a hoarder, and you can find them all in the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia, as I did. His Foreign Bodies, because that's what they're called, inspired a long poem, which I'm actually not going to read, even though I'm talking a lot about it. And that inspired the book and inspired me to think, it prompted me to think, what else is a foreign body, right? My grandmother, immigrants, my mother, and also to look at objects slightly differently. So if you look at the cover of the book on the back, those are actually some of the objects that were taken out of children's bodies. While I was working on the book that would become Foreign Bodies, coincidentally, my father was in steep decline, and ultimately, my sister and I had to take care of him and then deal with his death and his objects, his hoarding. So I'm going to read this very short poem from Foreign Bodies, and the only thing you need to know, just in case you don't know, is that birds sometimes, to feed their young, sort of regurgitate food back into the little peeper's mouth. The nest in winter. In the father's shadowy hoard, pillows belch feathers across mattress and floors. What was an oriental rug, now a carpet of scat, gone astray socks. Calendars from rescue shelters, angling for checks. There's nothing to toss among the vivid tethers to mother, maybe my mother, maybe father's. There's no margarine container any less rueful than a Netsuke from Kyoto. No expired sardine tin any less urgent than a dozen aerograms. No receipt less intimate than their honeymoon photo snapped in the local aquarium. The adult daughter takes in the spew, pablum that a bird feeds its nestling. So what is death? I had a student, an undergraduate years ago, who was speaking with me in conference, and his friend had just died, and he said, you know, wherever he is, someday I will be there as well. If he's dust, I'll be dust with him. And that really struck me to the core. So for this poem, dust is the organizing principle. I've been talking about in my class, how many ways can we think about dust? A dusting. However, Mother has reappeared, say, as notes on a feather duster, scientists say the galaxy was created thus. This daybreak, she seeds a cumulus cloud. Wherever Mother is bound, she's joined ashes, ashes, or dirt underfoot, or bits off Tower North and Tower South. Repurpose does not arrive whole cloth. From stardust, dust bunnies, dust bowl, dust unto dust, Whitman's boot soles in his leaves of grass, and Dunbar's what of his love, what of his lust, to samples that astronomers collect, dust is where the sparrow bathes herself. Not a cloud in the sky, Mother says, as she hangs the laundry outside. Father paints en plein air, and we girls sweep crumbs under the rug. This summer, Father sees inferno everywhere. No dust-ups from little girls. As a consequence, one scribbled on the dustbins of history, and the other dusted for fingerprints. And the mother? The mother lived in a vacuum. Inside the senseless corridors, the daughter cannot respire. Inside the vulgar cosmic, the mother cannot be revived in streaming wet traffic. Nowadays, I lie down in the sunlight to see my mama moting around as sympathetic ash. Yes, one morning, whether misty or yellow, I'll be soot with her, elegiac and original. Another way of thinking about the foreign body is the immigrant or the would-be immigrant. This poem was written after reading an article in the New York Times. I do a lot of research for my poems, whether about dust or, for example, having this newspaper clipping as a writing prompt. A daughter, after being asked if I write the occasional poem. After leaving Roxruja, after crossing Mexico with a coyote, after reaching at midnight that barren New Mexico border, a man and his daughter looked to Antelope Wells for asylum and were arrested. After forms read in Spanish to the Mayan-speaking father, after a cookie but no water, after the wait for the lone bus to return for their turn, after boarding, after the little girl's temperature spiked, she suffered 2 heart attacks, vomited, and stopped breathing. After medics revived the 7-year-old at Lordsburg Station, after she was flown to El Paso where she died, the coroner examined the failed liver and swollen brain. Then Jacqueline's chest and head were stitched up, and she returned to Guatemala in a short white coffin to her mother, grandparents, and dozens of women preparing tamales and beans to feed the grieving. In Quechua, W-E means mouth. My forthcoming collection in October is The Ghost Forest, New and Selected Poems. The new work is mostly forms that either stay with the form or they stray wildly away from the form. Here's the opening poem. It's a triolet. And in the title, the word disorder refers to malapropisms, a misuse of words, but also dysnomia, a disorder where a person has difficulty remembering names. So please, if you come up and ask me to sign your book, please, even my students, tell me your name, because I panic. I absolutely panic, Molly. A riotous disorder. She mistakes one word for another, something her brain naturally concocts. Her unruly gray matter and her heart mistake one word for an other, razor for river, cistern for sister, even cock for clock. She mistakes one word for a mother, a safe, her brain naturally unlocks. It took me 20 years to write a sestina. And not that I was doing it every day or even every year, but I'd try, give up, horrible, and then I'd try again later. Finally, after a break, I loosened up and took a more discursive route. I'm not going to describe the forms that I'm reading. I'm just hoping that the form will come through. But I will note that in this sestina, the repeating words are daughter, ship, right, left, safe, and whale. And then a note, the reference to the sailor's right is R-I-T-E, and it refers to a kind of hazing. To be a daughter and to have a daughter can forecast at odds relationships, especially when the mother hazards to write on her own hours, O-U-R-S, what's left while keeping the baby safe from herself as she and the baby wail, one in the crib, the other on the floor to wail with the vacuum cleaner, so the daughter can't hear mama drowning, so the new relationship isn't all arithmetic and geometry, all right angles barely connecting. What is left at dusk, still tender and safe, you couldn't pluck and lock in a safe, not unlike a girl calf and her mama whale, 2 generations of breaching daughters, applauded by tourists on a ship, but more likely, if they are right whales, or what species are left of those docile equatorial pods, never left by men hunting their fat, they are not safe. Larger than grays, smaller than blue whales, the very buoyant mother and son or daughter enjoy a year-long relationship unless whales spy these right whales to hunt. Funny, given the mariner's right to trick a man to think he'd been left for the sharks without the safety of pity or prayer. Then that whaler would wail for his own mother, wife, or daughter. When it comes to daughter-mother relationships, I've written on both till there's nothing left, without breaching safety, without wailing. After all, I love daughters and I love ships. I love that you read poems that prompted and inspired you. I do a lot of talking back and borrowing and sampling, and during the pandemic I discovered a form called the glossa. It opens with what is called a cabeza, a head. So you open with lines, 4 lines by another writer. And then you use those lines chronologically throughout, and there's an elaborate rhyme pattern as well. This is a slightly abbreviated version. If is a conjunction with Lucille Clifton. If there is a river more beautiful than this, let's start again. If there is a river more beautiful than this, bright as the blood, red edge of the moon, if I can conjure such radiance and safety as expressed shelter, then my task as a woman will be quenched. Yes, moon, yes, calendar, if there is a river that will cleanse my generous innermost abyss, then echo syllables of consonants. After all, red is a wish, more beautiful than this river that men call foul and view a girl infirm, though they brood if she does not breed. Yes, a woman pronounces her throbbing inside, bright as the blood, reliable as the planets, kind as the cocoon, crafty as paper. I know girls who've gone mad. Some left us livid. We owe them to commune with the red edge of the moon if as I read today, there are many wars across the world over, some receiving more focus than others. And what I find most outrageous and sad is that increasingly people take positions and then cease communicating. What I'm saying is not liberal or progressive hand-wringing, because we're talking about civil war also in this country. This is a poem I wrote many, many decades ago, but I'd like to read it right now. These current events. It is a late 20th century cliche that we must turn off the hypersensitive television that distracts our truer desire, that we must switch off all the lamps and overheads, open the shade to the natural night with its artificial lights, dress in silk to undress, play and play until even the nerve endings in our teeth beg and we throb forcefully with all the intimacy of reproducing ourselves in the act that will not. In the sweat of it all, despite ideology, we shut out the current events of the afternoon. A few miles from my office, a boat capsizes, excreting 300 men and women into the frigid undertow towards death or clean prison clothing and free legal assistance. They are not poor by their own standards, and not all the same, teacher, peasant, entrepreneur. What they fled was a state of dreaming to the object of that illusion as thousands before them, millions behind. One states he is ambitious. Another admits he's made a grave error. As their bus glides through Flushing, will they see the American destitute housed in cardboard boxes? Outside my window, I can't look the man in the eye who asks for spare change. He smells of urine, his mouth is toothless. Spare, Janus word for extra and little. Surplus for one, dear to another. Dear young man, there is a collective for you, a union, a regiment, the biblical multitude of spare people, the redundant masses of spare labor. Come exhausted and squalid. Come shit-covered, shit-faced, diseased and immune, dog and bitch. Come third world capitalist. Come Chinese laborer whose forefathers blew tunnels through our mountains, lay track across our continent, cut cane, starched the white shirts of the bourgeoisie, whose uncle of your grandmother fell unconscious under an avalanche of ice in the Sierra Nevadas and could not be recovered until the spring thaw. Come to the land of surplus value, where someone will overdose one night after 20 hours of bussing tables. These are stories you have not heard, or if you did, you translated as propaganda to keep you poor in a poor country, as opposed to poor in a wealthy country. I can't look in the face of the man cursing me out because I don't want my car window washed. I can't look at the man, empty cup, empty pant legs, who flashes a razor at me on his tongue. I can't speak to the girl pregnant with addiction, thanking me for nothing. I can pick up the paper any day of the week and find so much sorrow it is difficult to believe there are solutions. In the summer exhaust of a million air conditioners, I turn to my beloved for physical reassurance and simile. The children snore softly behind the fan's whirl because we have a place to plug in a fan. If I turn to him, if I turn to sheafs of paper in order to turn away from these current events, it is to revive the heartbeat of commitment. I know poetry cannot save, but it fuels the gut that is able. Thank you.
We do a little Q&A, as you know, wait for Hannah and Fatima to come to you with a microphone. So there are people listening from home can hear your question.
Cool.
Any questions for our poets this evening?
Thank you. Thank you both for those readings. My question is for Dante, who is my workshop instructor. I really enjoyed hearing the apposition of poems that your poems are written towards or for. And also the presence that was in Ed's introduction and also in that I could hear in Circus, the sections that you read of illusion. It made me think of, especially because of the first line, all months are cruel, it made me think of the original title for The Wasteland, which I think is He Do the Police in different voices. I wonder, and especially because I wrote a poem for the workshop last night that was towards a poem that I was beating my head against the wall for repeatedly for hours and hours and hours. I wonder, it's a process question. Do you start a poem thinking of another poem, or do you maybe start a poem and then find a poem that unlocks the process?
I never start a poem thinking of another poem, but before I sit down to put words on a page or words on a screen, I always read other poetry. It is just something that helps me get into a thinking space for writing. But I think I mentioned earlier that I compose in my head. So by the time I sit down to put words to the page or words on a screen, the poem is mostly composed. And so I just need the assistance of my literary peers and or ancestors to get me in the thinking space for writing. Some people stretch or go for a run or need a cup of coffee. I just need to read a few poems that mean a lot to me. They often have nothing to do with what I'm about to sit down and put to page, but it helps the words flow from my mind to that space.
So the question wasn't for me, but that's never stopped me from answering it. As you can see, I talk back to poems, and I'm influenced by poems and lines. And lately, for my new book, I have like a glossa, which directly begins with a gloss with 4 lines from another writer. So it was a form that I tried writing a bunch of them, and a couple of them are pretty good. So I would start with lines that are so important to me that they're almost part of my own body, you know. So and then I just see where I'd go. And as I said, some work, some don't. I've been also writing a lot of golden shovels. So those are poems where the end word, if you read down the side of the end word of each line, they make a poem or a line written by someone else. That was a roundabout description, but I think you know. Anyway, so I've been writing a lot of those. So those reference, using title, someone else's line or a title is a way of talking back and also honoring. So there are a lot of poems out there. Oh, my husband Harold back there has a wonderful everyman anthology that he did with Kurt Brown called Conversation Pieces, poems that talk to other, poems in conversation with other poems. So it's what we do, even when we're not entirely
Absolutely.
confessing up to it.
We should also be transparent. Kimiko was also one of my poetry teachers. I would say that, and so using other text to inspire and/or become a part of your own text was something that she gave to students. I think still gives to students. Maybe doing that here as well.
Yeah, since we're on the subject of influence, okay, so you're both doing this thing of being very transparent about the work that you're interacting with. But how do you also, or how does it work for you to have negative example? Like when somebody's doing something that you really reject, and does that produce ideas? Would you juxtapose with something that produced ideas that you had negative reaction to?
Sure. Well, the whole of Circus was a negative reaction to what I discovered being one of very few black people in a predominantly white MFA program, and also what I was experiencing internally from a poetry community of black people. You needed to be one way or the other. So the poem initially began about I was resistant to this, what I saw as a constant relegation of black people, particularly black Americans, to the space of performance. So that's what the Circus is. But also in the MFA program, when I arrived, believe it or not, in the 21st century, all of the people were still saying you really didn't know anything about poetry unless you knew T.S. Eliot and knew things about T.S. Eliot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the poem was trying to assert what poets of the Harlem Renaissance were also having to deal with because they were contemporaries of Eliot. Wasteland came out in 22. We're right in the lead up of the Harlem Renaissance. And I became obsessed with this quote by Melvin Tolson, a great poet. So great, such a great poet, that another country invited him to be their poet laureate. That's how good he was. And he said very early on that he was going to go beyond where Mr. Eliot went. That was his statement, and he wrote lots of incredible poetry. And another poet named Alan Tate backed him up and said, actually, yes, you have achieved that. You have gone beyond where Mr. Eliot went. And so I wanted all of those things I was resisting all of that, and I put that into Circus.
Yes, I can't think of any examples offhand. There's some poems that I feel obliged to teach, and I don't really like them. So
Give us an example.
so I like Sylvia Plath. I don't like all her poems. And Daddy is just not one of my favorites. But every time I teach it, I learn something from it. Every single, and I've been teaching at Queens College for 30 years, so every single time. So there's something in it for me anyway. So whether I push back or find something in the poem that does something that I want to do, there's still a relationship.
One of the most recent poems I've written, like committed to a page, but I wrote probably 20 years ago. The title is The Arrival of the Blacks by Sylvia Plath. And the reason I haven't published it is because I'm not sure if it's plagiarism or not. I don't think it is, but the conceit is it's literally Sylvia Plath's poem, The Arrival of the Bees. I just changed the word bees to blacks. And when you read it with that context, you get a sort of poetic version of what you get when you hear Nina Simone sing Pirate Jenny from the Threepenny Opera.
I think if you put after Sylvia Plath somewhere in there, you can get away with it. I don't know.
My teacher, so she's given me permission.
I'll get the legal bill. I can see that right now.
Thank you both for your reading. Or your readings. I'm always really curious when instructors talk about how it took them X amount of years to get a form down or to write a form, and you mentioned it took you a while for the Sestina. Why, and how did you find your way out of that?
I think I just had to talk about beating your head against the wall. I think I just had to keep trying because I love the form. When I was starting to write, as a hippie, hippies didn't write in form because it was bourgeois. So it took me a while just to get to forms at all. And I love them, come to find out. They can be very freeing in a way that, anyway. I was so intent on making meaning while writing a sestina, which is, first of all, it's hard enough, but to have meaning drive the poem, which I should know better than that. But I just was, I don't know, I was way too rigid. So when I let the words be a little more playful, and I allowed myself to be more discursive rather than intentional, that's when I was freed up to write something that I really liked.
I mean, I write lots of formal poems. I don't have that experience of it taking me a long time to get them because the forms have rules. So the best example I could give you is Terence Hayes' American Sonnet, which is, we sliced our watermelon into smiles. Just repeated that line 14 times. It's a perfect sonnet because the line is iambic pentameter, it recurs 14 times, and smile rhymes with smile all the way down. But I say that, I mean, it's very clever in the historical context, but I say that it's easy to get because I think Rita Dove said, she wrote 100 sonnets before she wrote one that she would ever share with anyone or let alone publish. And so what Kimiko just said is whether it means anything or not is your decision as the writer, but you can get the form easily. Like, you just try it one time and you will get it as long as you follow the rules. It's then whether what you've written down is any good. That's what takes the practice, but that's the practice for any poem.
Thank you both so much. I was really struck by just sort of the breadth of deep, kind of dark, heavy topics that both of your poetry really works with, I guess. And my question is kind of like it's maybe a broad question, and I'm sorry about that, but what do you see as the relation between like politics and poetry? This is something that I'm thinking about as a writer who's mostly working in prose, but is very, I think, metaphysically and existentially interested in these larger questions, and I'm also very allergic to propaganda and am very aware of the power that language has on the other end of things, which is like a certain rhetorical power. And to me, art distinguishes itself from other types of linguistic expression because it evades certain power trenches or modes of meaning that can kind of be flattening. And I just felt like what you both expressed was very multidimensional and sort of kept open these things while at the same time sort of clearly stating a stance on certain very difficult topics. And I guess, yeah, how do you think about that, and how did you do that? It's kind of magical, yeah.
I've been around a while. In fact, Friday is my birthday, and I'm going to be 69, so I've been around the block. When I first started writing back in the 70s, there were a lot of people writing political poetry, but we were told not to write political poetry, that it wasn't poetry, that it was going to be sloganeering. That's not true. There's a plenty of poetry that is about social justice and political topics and comments, right? So what I learned from reading and listening to other writers is that politics, social justice, all those themes, subjects, are just like love poems. Love is a topic. All these other topics, right? Childhood, childbirth. I mean, they're all different subjects, and politics is just one of them. And it's hard to write about, absolutely. And what you said about a poem being dimensional, that's the trick. That's the trick in any poem. But there was a great deal of prejudice against that kind of poetry. My parents, who are both visual artists, told me, don't hang out with those communists and radicals, and don't write political poetry, and especially don't marry a communist. So I didn't listen to them.
I would say you're on the right track. Thinking about metaphysics and existentialism, it's very helpful to think as large as you can about something, and then you realize how small the overt thing is. I have been talking a little bit to my students here about inscrutability and opacity. I think it may have been Ed who said unknowability. And again, for me as an individual poet, it goes back to what I was saying about really as a young person and just accepting the identity of being a poet, how black poets, the expectation is that we are going to write about politics, because who is most affected by politics but us downtrodden, you know. And I really resisted that. It doesn't mean that I don't write politically. In fact, a lot of poems that I write that I think I'm doing a good job of masking it get me in trouble. But I always move on some other feeling or emotion, like Siding with the Israelis, a poem that got me in a lot of trouble, was written out of, like, I don't like to call them writing about. And I feel that the latter poem is the mode that I like to be in, because now there's just so much, there are 24-hour news channels, there are all the poor newspapers that are just getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and the news is getting the same, and the lines between at least our representatives are starting to blur. And so you really have to seek out your own politics, and it's very hard to practice solidarity in the midst of all of that. And so
Thanks. Really enjoyed both your readings. Thank you so much. So I don't want to mischaracterize what Sarah said, but the first day we were talking about painting and drawing, and what's the difference? Are there differences? Can one be another? Where do they intersect? And when I was listening to your readings and when I'm listening to this conversation, talking about poetry and the breadth of subject matter, for example, or what a poem can be, and the different types of form, or maybe you're encouraged not to use a particular form. And my question for you is, and this is sincere, it's maybe an insane question, what is a poem?
My students are working on a constraint tonight and maybe early tomorrow morning on a particular structure of poem called a concessional poem, where you set up, you begin negating a lot of things only to end in a positive argument, right? So a poem is not prose, it is not fiction, it is not a play, it is not a piece of journalism. You might disagree with that, Kimiko, but you know. And I think all of those other things are so defined and have so many attributes that it is very easy to distinguish a poem from all of those other things. But to say what a poem is, there are some historic definitions, right? And that's the easiest way, certainly, to try to impart that to students, is just to share the historical definitions. You know, it's lineated. It often has rhyme. There is often meter. But then modernism came along and changed all of that. So really, what is a poem? What I would discourage people from thinking a poem is anything, because it's not that either. That's the best answer I've got.
I like that very much. For years, when I was teaching an introduction to poetry literature class, I was using anthologies, and none of the anthologies ever had a definition of poetry in it. It was amazing. I'm supposed to be teaching, you know, if you're teaching an anthropology course, you start out with what is anthropology, right? But it was amazing to me, so I started collecting definitions of poetry and would just Xerox it, and we'd talk about it. And my favorite definition, and I totally agree with your definition of poetry, and I'd accept that all those genres like journalism and creative nonfiction, whatever, you can use all of those, as we know in hybrid text class, you can use all of those juxtaposed to create a heightened piece that you can call poetry or hybrid text. My favorite definition of poetry comes from the very serious Penguin book of literary terms. The definition for poetry is about 2 pages, but the first entry is poetry is a species of magic.
That's it. Big, big, big hand of applause for Kimiko Hahn and Dante Micheaux. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Remember, Dante and Kimiko will be signing books at the back. Check out the books that are available. Merch, art gallery, and have a good night. Tomorrow night is student night. Remember, if you haven't signed up, please consider doing so. You won't regret it. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to our poets, and please have a great evening. Thank you.